Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a really fun build that I really enjoyed playing with, and that's going to be a Halberd Shield build. And for this build, we're going to be using the Guardian Swordspear Halberd, which is a little bit different than the other Halberds. It has a really fast moveset, and while it does have a running poke, the neutral light attacks are going to be fantastic. We also do have access to Shield Bash, which is a slightly shorter version of Shield Crash, but the benefit here is that you can't be guard broken while using that. So even if you're out of stamina, when you go for Shield Bash, you won't get guard broken, which is a really nice benefit, kind of a reason that I prefer it over Shield Crash. The build is going to be level 125 and is primarily dexterity based, so we'll be running this with 59 points in dexterity with the added 5 from Millicent's prosthesis, and we'll be using lightning infused halberds as well as shields, so you can infuse a shield, which is kind of nice, especially if you're in water. This does cause blood loss buildup, but that never really became a factor in this build. You could definitely use it in an arcane setting, but for me, I wasn't really using the blood loss buildup. It was mostly just for the damage, and the damage is not insignificant. So I also have some other options on hand, like the Banished Knight Keen Halberd. I didn't really use that too much. Also, the Great Bow is nice to have. And then I would also swap over to a Clawmark Seal sometimes, or a Misericord just for crits. And then we do have a swap around talisman, so you can use Shard of Alexander, which is a nice option. You can further boost your successive attacks with the Rotten Wing Sword insignia if you want, and that's a great option to pair these two together if you think you're going to be getting a lot of successive attacks. And just due to the speed of the Guardian Swordspear, the successive attacks are, not insignificant. You can definitely get that built up, and it's, pretty nice. Also, you can catch your opponent off guard with a shield crash in some cases, and that can be further boosted by those successive attacks. One thing I do want to mention, if you are going to be one-handing the Guardian Swordspear, is that there is a true combo. So if you jump and land a heavy, that true combos into a light attack, and that's going to do immense damage. So I definitely like that aspect. One thing I slept on a little bit was the crouch attack, and I do recommend that for invasion contexts. It's not really super necessary in duels, but just to kind of keep multiple opponents at bay, it's nice to have something that's not either a running heavy or just like a regular heavy, and that comes out as a slash. One last thing that I want to mention about the Guardian Swordspear is that it does do 125 poise damage, so if you're facing somebody in full Bullgoat with the Bullgoat Talisman, you're not going to poise break them. In those instances, I'd recommend switching to the two-handed moveset. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build and kind of the strategy that I employed while using it. If you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd definitely appreciate it. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the invasions and arena content. All right, so jumping into our first invasion, we have a group in the Leyndell area, and I see that there's a wizard in the mix, so I quickly swap over to a seal and use the magic fortification. However, the wizard is not super interested in acknowledging my presence, so I'm able to kind of just run at them while they're fighting the guys with the horns and get a nice roll catch. The roll catching potential with this weapon is very, very strong. You can essentially reaction roll catch them and really just try to bait them into any rolls, and you'll oftentimes be in a good spot. So right when I'm kind of getting the one-on-one with the host that I'd like, a blue comes in, and here I don't land the jumping heavy, and that's one thing to note about the jumping heavy is that the hitbox comes into play rather late. So if you can delay the actual press of the button for the heavy attack until you're pretty late in your jump, you'll be more consistent with it. That said, it means that you're not able to bring it out super quickly, and that can be an issue sometimes because it is one of the slower attacks, but it's kind of a high risk, high reward since you are able to deliver that true combo with the light attack afterwards. So I definitely went for maybe more jumping heavies than I should have. However, in most cases, the jumping heavies are going to be better than the jumping lights just because you get the sweep attack. So the skulls kind of start flying at me coming into the mix, and I hop down here where there's some PvE, and I managed to get the kill on the blue with Shield Bash. So Shield Bash is definitely strong, especially if you're running a lightning build and you have the lightning tier in your physic, which I do, and that kind of potential to just block incoming damage and catch your opponent off guard can be great. And here you can see it as a roll catch. It's not too bad either. So we did have our host panic rolling, and when I felt like the timing was, gonna line up with where they were, I went for Shield Bash and managed to get the kill with it. So moving on to our next invasion, we have a 2v1 in Leyndell, and the host is not paying attention. They've got white mask on and some scavenger curved swords, and then it seems like the Phantom didn't know who the bad guy was, so they started moonveiling the host, which I thought was just a little bit funny. And in that moment, I thought I had the jumping heavy connected with the Phantom. However, I didn't, so when I went for the follow-up light attack, I kind of ate a couple of attacks and lost some health, so now I'm kind of on the back foot. And when you're in Leyndell, kind of one of the, or not Leyndell, Limgrave rather, one of the better options is to use these walls as kind of a way to screen your opponents from seeing you. And then here I baited them with my heal, so I knew they were a little bit further behind and they'd get super aggressive when I did go for that heal, and I knew they could hear it. And so that was kind of my opportunity to use the Stormhawk Axe to take care of the Phantom, and then when it's just a one-on-one against this particular build, it's very easy to quickly come out on top, especially if you have a host that's kind of panic rolling a little bit. So this next invasion was also a rather quick one, and we do have some bleed builds in the mix. You'll note that I switched my talisman to increase my robustness when playing against these players. I definitely recommend that if you see Scavenger Curved Swords, or if, you know, Rivers of Blood is in the mix. It's just going to make it a lot easier to handle the incoming pressure associated with a bleed proc. Even if it doesn't do damage, the kind of stun animation can be enough to finish you off. So talisman swap there was definitely beneficial and helped turn what could have been a tricky invasion into a pretty easy one. So this next one, we do see a little bit of latency. We have that arrow kind of connect with the ground, and then a second later the Phantom does get hit with the kind of wind animation, and the other Phantom really doesn't have too much health either. So rather than dealing with the two players coming up the ladder, I begin the chase down on the Phantom that I know is low health and kind of isolated, and the PvE does a great job of finishing them off right before I'm able to land my jumping light attack. So when you do have a Phantom that's kind of isolated like that, I definitely recommend, you know, pouncing on them, especially if you have players that are in a long animation like going up the ladder. It can be really nice to turn a 3v1 into a 2v1. In this case, I didn't need it because of the PvE, but you can't really rely on that. And then here we do get a nice backstab with the Radahn swords, which are just very easy to backstab, especially between the first and the second part of the animation. But the host is really enjoying kind of that L2 button with their Sacred Blade. I think they go for maybe one or two jumping attacks as well as a light attack here or there. But the Sacred Blade spam is difficult to deal with just because of the poise damage that it does. So we were able to finish off the other Phantom, and then the PvE comes in again and really comes in clutch for the kill on the host. So 2 kills to the PvE and 1 kill to me, but I will absolutely take it. And then this next invasion is a rather quick one. We have some very bold moves coming out of the player with the Mushroom Crown, and we're able to just get a light attack on them while they're still in their Ash of War animation. So they definitely did not have the right amount of health to go for an attack like that, and now we just have the Radahn player left. So I go ahead and switch over to just the shield because I feel like some parries might be warranted, and here we do get the parry just as a blue summons into the world. They see me grab the riposte, but they still want to kill me, so they bring out the Moonveil. I switch back to my shield just because, you know, what's better than 1 parry, 2 parries, and we do get the parry and then the swap for the riposte. And I do always enjoy kind of parrying Moonveil, especially when you get it with Carrion Retaliation, just because you get those little daggers too. It feels nice, it looks good, so a nice happy little parry situation there. And here you can see a moment where I went for a light attack on a player with full Bullgoat, and they didn't get stunned. And that was a very problematic moment. Their level of poise was a very good counter to kind of the slowness of the Halberd moveset, and it would have been a good idea to switch to the two-handed moveset, but there's quite a bit going on, and just kind of the pressure of the situation was a little bit more problematic than what I could do. And at this point, I had switched my armor set, so you will note that I will be fat rolling in just a moment when I have the Great Bow out. However, it actually doesn't end up mattering too much, but we do get a couple shots off and some chip damage on these players with the Great Bow. The armor set that I had in the beginning of the showcase is going to allow you to use the Great Bow if you want to. So here you can see me fat roll, and then I swap over to the Stormhawk Axe just because I am hopeful that they'll all kind of rush in and try to get the kill on me, just because, you know, group of 3 is usually pretty aggressive, but I'm in a great spot to really Stormhawk axe them because they either are going to stay in my Ash of War or fall off the ledge. And so if you can kind of fill up that space with your Ash of War, the hyper armor and poise damage that it does is pretty significant, and that's a nice way to just come out of a 3v1 successfully when you're playing against players that probably know what they're doing a little bit and would really come out with the W against you if you were just in an open area and you didn't really have that high burst damage. So punishing the aggression is one of the few tools that you have to really take care of that type of situation. Next up, we have a group of 2, and this invasion is going to be an excellent showcase of where Shield Bash is super useful. So I'm trying to use these stairs to funnel everybody into a small area, and I can really see from their aggression level that I can essentially assume that they're going to run in and attack me almost every time. So if I get them in that stairwell, I'll be able to use Shield Bash and just queue it up as soon as I assume that they'll be close to me, because I'll think they'll be in their attack animation and it's going to do much more damage to them than it is going to do to me. So here again, we get the Shield Bash, and it's really nice as just a way to discourage, you know, the super aggressive play. And if the players aren't discouraged from it, they're absolutely going to eat like 400 damage. So it's a nice kind of option to have on hand, and I don't usually play with shields, so it was kind of a fun thing to have in the mix. Here I'm in a pretty bad spot just because my blood loss meter is very high and my health is very low, and if I get hit with one attack, and even if I get a phantom proc, it will stun me, and then it will force me into a position where I might get hit for the last bit of health from the other player. So you can see there I did do a quick turn and burn with Shield Bash even though my health was pretty low, and that ultimately gave me the space that I needed to get some more health back. And here I switch over to the two-handed moveset of the Guardian Sword Spear and use the extra range that you get from something like Piercing Fang to just get the last bit of, or the last half of the health from the Phantom. And now that it's a one-on-one, things are definitely going in my favor, and we do get the finish with Shield Bash. So Shield Bash actually came out very clutch in that invasion, and if you have the right environment for it and the right players to use it against, it is a pretty good tool to have. Like, I haven't used it too much. I think my Maldron cosplay was the only other time that I'd used it too much, but it wasn't on a shield that did very much damage. So this one is a great option to have on hand, and I really enjoyed it playing with this build. And moving on to our next invasion, I'm playing it pretty slow, but I do see that a Hunters come into the world and they're fighting the Cleanrot Knight, which is the only PvE that's kind of off to the left on that bridge area. And my hope is that the blue is going to drag that PvE into the area with the host, and essentially will squeeze the Phantom and the host with PvE on both sides. And kind of true to form, the blue does come in and does bring the PvE with them. So just a classic blue maneuver right there, where they're completely aggressive on the invader and have kind of no sense about, you know, maybe I should take care of this PvE first so it doesn't flank the host and the Phantom. And that puts me in a great spot to have a lot of PvE come into the mix, kill the blue, and then I begin the chase down on the Phantom. And now it's like one on many with the host. They are rune arced, but there's just like too much. I think they're quite overwhelmed. I'm able to space their heavy attack pretty well, and then just continue the chase down on them. And here you can see a nice jumping heavy to light attack true combo that does quite a bit of their health, and they're panic rolling at this point, so I'm able to deliver just a nice running light attack. And that running light attack is so good for roll catching, especially when you don't have to deal with kind of the potential stuns associated with other players in the world. So one-on-one, this is a very deadly build, and that's kind of how I felt when I was in the arena as well, where I felt like as an invader, it wasn't too bad, but in the arena is where it really shined. And I should give a shout out to Mag Casual, who kind of suggested this setup, not with the Guardian Sword Spear per se, but just the halberd off shield setup. And I've had a lot of success with it in the context of duels, and I really do appreciate that suggestion. I think he mentioned it during a Twitch stream, and just having like new build suggestions that, you know, people have tried and liked is always appreciated, because you know, there's so many different ways to play this game, and it really keeps it interesting to try new things. So a big shout out there. And this last invasion, not too much to say. We were able to bait our opponents in with the Great Bow, and then kind of pick them off one by one. Once the bird got involved, it wasn't too bad. So in this next invasion, I spawn in, and I'm in a little bit of a tight spot. I use my iframes to drink my physic, but we do have a fat rolling phantom, which was a nice thing to see. And they are using Moonveil, so I would have liked to have more time so I could use something like Magic Fortification, but we're able to get in a Shield Bash, which does close to half their health, so not too much of a challenge here. And we do need to look out for these barbaric roar attacks coming from the host with the Zweihander, because those can do a ton of damage if you're not careful. So they're very easy to telegraph, but you know, if you're busy fighting a phantom and not paying attention to what the host is doing, it can catch you off guard and just be very significant. So the reaction timing of this phantom isn't amazing, and we're able to get them in a chase down spot pretty easily. I go for some of that kind of like wiggling with my left joystick to just encourage them to panic roll. It works, and I'm able to get the roll catch. And then here we're able to get a nice backstab on the host. So they were going for some very backstabbable attacks, and at this point a blue does get summoned into the world. Here I'm not sure why I didn't go for the true combo. I did have it connect with the light attack, but the second time we are able to catch them again with the jumping heavy and then combo that into a light attack, and that's kind of game over for the blue. And you can see here that the speed of the Guardian Sword Spear is very significant. It's faster than the guard counter that the host is going for, so we're actually able to punish them both for the guard and the guard counter, and they're not able to get any damage out. So a really nice element there. Here we get another one of the true combos, and they go for a guard counter. This time I delayed my light attack, and I definitely should have, but while the host was going for a heavy attack, I managed to grab a final backstab and finish off the 3v1 with not too much difficulty. And moving on to our last invasion of the showcase, we have a group of 3 out in a wide open field. It is raining a little bit, which is going to be helpful for just kind of the lightning damage associated with my weapon and shield. So we have that going for us, but we have a player with a Naginata. There's another one on their back, so we might get some L1 spam from them. We also have a host with Rivers of Blood, and then we have another player with the Guardian Sword Spear, which is, as I mentioned earlier, great for roll catching, especially when you're only fighting one other player. So there we get a jumping light, which is kind of rare, but it worked out there, so nothing really to complain about. The space that I'm in right now is not really conducive to the setup that I have. I don't have any crazy burst damage that works really well in an open field, and I need to be very careful about every bit of chip damage that I go for, because it has the potential to result in massive damage on my end. And at this point we get some Dragon Breath coming out. I try to land a jumping heavy and knock them out of the animation, but the poise damage of Dragon Breath is too much, and I get knocked out of the air. So eventually I do get them to just kind of chase me back towards Castle Morn. And as I'm running away from them, I do manage to throw a Frost Pot and just at least get them frostbitten. My goal is to go up the elevator and either isolate them or have like a surprise attack, something like Rain of Arrows as they're coming up the elevator. So I managed to get up, they don't get up in time, and before any of my plans can come to fruition, the host does fall down the elevator shaft and we come out with the W there. So that was the final invasion of the showcase, and at this point we'll be moving on to the duel portion. All right, so moving on to the duel portion of the showcase, we have a mage, and the kind of approach that I recommend when playing against a mage is let them get a lot of their spells out early and try to avoid any of that incoming damage just by strafing, and then slowly make your way over towards them. So don't rush in too quickly, and then once they're in a spot where, you know, their initial barrage of attacks have not connected, you'll be in a good spot to hopefully deliver some damage. Now, it was a good idea to switch over to the Moonlight Greatsword, have something with a little bit of poise damage in the mix, but they're kind of on their back foot at this point, and they probably don't have a ton of FP, so we can be pretty aggressive and just kind of force them into a position where they either need to roll away or get hit with our neutral light attacks, which just come out very, very quickly. Moving on, we have our next opponent who is running a greatsword as well as an offhand dagger, and that can be very, very scary to play against. Judging by their weapon setup and kind of just the gold emblem next to their name, I'm assuming that they're a pretty strong player, and I want to kind of take it slow. Don't really rush into things, bait them into attacks potentially. That's very much the play style of halberd is to, punish attacks that have longer animations with a running light attack or something. So I try not to lean on that too much. I try not to play too passively. I want to, have some aggression of my own and possibly give them some openings to punish it, as well as, bait them into attacks that I can punish. And here is something that I did quite often. If it looked like Shield Bash wasn't going to connect, I would turn around, just like unlock and face the opposite direction, so I would Shield Bash away from my opponent. And I strongly recommend doing that. It's a great way to avoid getting punished for it. And we can see Shield Bash does actually come into play here. We're able to connect it and get a decent amount of damage off, as well as the final hit with just the Guardian Sword Spear. So definitely a strong player there, and somebody we needed to play against, with their skill in mind. So next up we have a player that I played a couple times and definitely enjoyed the fights against them. They're running a Zweihander with an offhand greatsword, so not something you see too often, definitely off meta, but they definitely have good timing and spacing, so I need to respect that, absolutely, and just kind of play with, knowing that I'll get punished if I play too aggressively, and if I don't make the right decisions in a given moment, there will be a lot of damage coming my way. So one element of their build is the frostbite damage, and I really want to make sure that I don't get frostbitten. Part of that is the frost proc will leave me susceptible to getting hit by the offhand greatsword, as well as, some extra damage. So there we get a little bit of, cheeky phantom range, and we're able to punish their aggression while they're low on health with a Shield Bash. So I felt like Shield Bash was kind of a bucket of cold water to throw over your opponent's head, because they are in a great spot to come out with a quick attack, but if you get the read on it, it's going to come out very quickly. You're going to negate the damage that they're doing while punishing them. So, finishing an opponent with Shield Bash is just kind of rough, I imagine, for that opponent, and it's a very good tool to have in your pocket. So this next player is running a greatsword and definitely has good timing and spacing. You also see them quick stepping around a little bit, which can make the timing of my attacks a little bit harder to predict. But we do get a backstep attempt, which does go straight into a Shield Bash. And that was one thing I liked about Shield Bash, is it's a little bit delayed. You get the block early, but then the follow-up damage is a little bit later. So it can be nice when facing somebody who's quick stepping or something, because you do start the animation when you think they might attack, but if they quick step instead, then you'll just catch them at the end of that quick step, which is fantastic. Next up, we have a player going for a Madness setup, so I switch my Talisman over to something with a little bit more focus and try to avoid their incoming incantations, as well as punish their use of the spear. So they have some good spacing at first, however, they do go for their Ash of War, and I believe they free-aimed it, which wasn't a bad idea, but it left them open to a backstab, and then here we do get the Wake Up with Shield Bash, and I definitely got that Wake Up a few times, so not a bad option, and probably more consistent than just like a running attack or maybe a charged heavy. And kind of the main thing is that they need to be in your area. If they roll, directly away from you, Shield Bash probably won't reach as the Wake Up, but if they roll in your general vicinity around you, you'll be in a good spot. So here we do get a true combo with the jumping heavy, followed up by a neutral light, and then manage to get another neutral light. So the kind of chain of attacks that come out with the Guardian Sword Spear are so fast, it can be really hard to not get punished by just the follow-up light attack, and in some cases, depending on latency, it might even true combo with itself. I wouldn't say often, but I was surprised about how often I was able to land a neutral light attack followed by another neutral light attack and have both connect. So here we get somebody that's coming out real aggressive with the Pocket Sand, and we just kind of bait them into some panic rolls with the kind of aggression wiggle, and do manage to kind of end that fight early. So, maybe not the most effective strategy for my opponent, but it might work on some people. So happy to come out with the W here. And moving on, we have a player that's using Black Flame Protection, which is going to negate 40% of physical damage. So I'm happy to have a Lightning Sword Spear and Lightning Infused Shield on my person, so that at least that type of damage is not negated. And you'll also see me eat a crab, which was just kind of my way to follow up their buff with a buff of my own. And, it was kind of cool of them to let me eat it. And I think in this particular duel, I was doing a good job of not getting hit by too much, and then really going for the punish with the Shield Bash, because they were in kind of one-shot range with the Shield Bash, and it's really going to make it hard for any aggression that they have coming my way. It's just going to get punished with counter damage. So Shield Bash is a great way to finish players in the arena, and just like kind of something I enjoyed to have in the mix. It made the playstyle feel a little bit more fresh, and it's more interesting, I think, than something like an off dagger or something that we are seeing quite a bit more of. So, I am definitely a strong proponent of the off dagger. It's a lot of fun, but, it's something that I'm seeing more and more, and it's nice to be able to mix it up with something else in your offhand that is both good and more unique than what you normally see in Invasion. So here we do get a nice finish with Piercing Fang, and that was a Ash of War that I had on quite often throughout the use of this weapon. I did also have Braggart's Roar though, which was really nice as just kind of a weapon buff. So having Braggart's Roar will also increase your stamina regeneration, and that's really nice for a stamina intensive build like this, since you are frequently going for chase down. So if you get that stamina back even more quickly, you're going to be in a great spot. So this player I've played at least twice, and we'll see their duels with me back to back. The first duel didn't go super well for them. It ended a little bit quickly, but here we can see the second one, and they definitely kind of took, they had some appreciation for the previous duel and played a little bit more defensively, and just, I think they played very well, in both duels, but they seem to kind of adapt to my playstyle a little bit in the second one, so definitely some respect there. They're using a setup that's pretty dangerous. It's Morgoth's Curve Sword, so bleed is definitely a factor, and they're using it pretty well with nice jumping mix-ups as well as the Ash of War. They don't commit to the full one unless they have to. Definitely good kind of patience there and discipline for using that L2 button, and it's strongest that way when you can kind of have it be a surprise. So here I'm almost bled and I'm at half health, so if that Ash of War had connected, that probably would have been the end of me, but they are in kind of low health range. I'm doing some talisman swapping just to kind of get the added benefit for the Ash of War on Shield Crash, or Shield Bash rather, but it doesn't end up being a factor here, and we're able to get a trade for the W in that second duel. So this next player is going to be running some magic as well as an offhand shield as well. They're going for a parry and ended up parrying their own spell, which just kind of reminds me back to when this game was released and Carrion Retaliation was just like completely broken. And here, unfortunately, we get the Shield Bash as a guard break, but we aren't able to get the riposte just due to our lack of stamina. So I did find that the Shield Bash did do quite a lot of stamina damage if somebody was guarding, and I often guard broke them. So a good thing to have in the mix there. And that was our second to last duel. This last duel here is just going to be kind of a good counter to the Hand of Melania, and we'll be seeing Shield Bash coming in clutch again. So if you made it this far, I definitely appreciate you watching, and this is going to be the end of the duel portion. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching, and because you did make it this far, I want to reward you with a little bit of a treat. So this is a glitch that I found out about recently. Shout out to Heartbreaker Jaker for showing it to me, and it involves adding a particle effect to your character when there isn't really a real particle effect. So what you need to do is have no FP, or at least not enough FP to create the particle effect that you want, and then you need to crouch, eat a bolus, and then while you're in the bolus eating animation, click the square button to use the next thing in the menu, which should be like the ancestral infant head. And that gives you the particle effect. And you can repeat this process multiple times if you want to. So you can go ahead and crouch, eat a bolus, then switch and spam square, and that gives you this particle effect. So kind of a glitch here. Not really something that's useful, but also not really something that's harmful. It's not going to impact anyone's gameplay, but it's just something that I thought was a little bit fun and wanted to mention. Just, it's better to have bug awareness. I think if From Software wants to fix this, that would be great, but I think it's doubtful that they will. So yeah, just a little fun extra tidbit here. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.